Today is African Traditional Medicine Day. Now, the WHO estimates that around 80% of Africans rely heavily on traditional medicine or Umuthi for their basic health needs. A little-known fact is that a number of Western medicines were developed using African traditional plants. Our next guest is Dorcas Lekganyane. She is a botanist. She joins us via our video link this morning. I mean, is that a little-known fact, do you think, Dorcas, that a lot of the Western medicines that we do rely on were developed from African Umuthi?
Yes, it is a very little-known fact. In fact, it's one that when you do tell stories about, it kind of comes across as taboo. So yes, but we're making light of it today.
So 80% of Africa's population relies on traditional medicine for their basic health needs. You know, in the same way that we're talking about little-known facts, does this also qualify that such a large portion of the continent does rely on this?
You know what it is? I feel like everybody uses traditional medicine at home, but nobody knows as to what scale everybody is using the traditional medicine. So when you put it as a figure and it becomes a matter of fact, when you say 80%, then it becomes like, wow, almost that's every household that you can think of. Yeah. But we do know that in Africa, healthcare is a matter that is of great concern. Most people don't have access to hospital or medical aid. So traditional medicine becomes that basis where, you know, if you have a cold, flu or something that is not severe, where you feel like you have to go to the hospital, get admitted into the hospital, then you do rely on your herbs and traditional medicine to substitute you going for pills or having to see a doctor, which you don't have the money to pay for.
I mean, this is such a timeless discussion given the COVID-19 pandemic, and there have been so many discussions around traditional medicine being used to treat at least the symptoms of COVID-19. How do we move the dial so that traditional medicine becomes more mainstream, shall we call it, becomes more modernized?
Yeah, you know, it's actually, now that you're talking about it, just before COVID, speaking about traditional medicine was seemingly taboo, even for me as a young person. But since COVID has kind of cusped on us, I find a lot of people actually going back to the roots, and to say the roots actually using herbs. I know a lot of people are using herbs to diffuse at home, and these are things that they have always had, trees that have been growing naturally. Now they've gotten a use now, and it's to say that when in crisis, we'll always go back to what we know.
As a botanist yourself, you know, as you've been tracking the story, shall we say specifically around COVID-19, what are some of the herbs that have been at the forefront of this pandemic in terms of traditional medicine?
I'm going to say them in Spedi, but I know they carry many names. But two that I do know, the blue gum tree, it's not Spedi, and another herb called Lingala that has been exhausted in its use. There are very many other herbs that can use. It's just that they're not popular in mainstream knowledge that, you know, we can use for respiratory relief. We're not saying for COVID specifically, but, you know, COVID does attack the respiratory tract. So there are very many other respiratory plants that can be used to kind of ail or rather relieve one if they're having COVID symptoms or just want to avoid having COVID symptoms. In fact, pretty much most people know umpepo can be used as a diffuser at home just to cleanse the air so that, you know, if there's a bacterial infection floating around, it is you know, it's mustered before it actually gets into the body. So these are the things that we've been using for centuries that now becoming more popularized and mainstream, and good for that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about the steaming that has been advised as a way of, as you say, relieving the symptoms of COVID-19. I mean, there are lots of benefits to keeping the subject taboo, aren't there? Not least of which for Big Pharma.
No, it is. There's a large, I mean, if I'm Big Pharma, I would think that if I'm keeping it taboo, I have an opportunity to tap into these plants and actually produce something that, you know, I can mainstream and get people to use, which has been that has been the crisis with sharing, with Sangomas fearing to share knowledge, is that once they share knowledge to big pharma or to anybody, the fear is that, you know, some corporate will come in and take that plant, put rights on it, and you know, produce something that is going to be very mainstream and very Western, but never give credit to the people that actually have been using it for days. In fact, credit there is not given. You turned into like, oh no, why would you want to use that?
Yeah, people who have been using it for generations. I mean, how do we go about protecting the institutional knowledge of people like Sangomas, people in communities who know about, you're a botanist, but they know different names to the plants. They have more intricate generational knowledge of what particular plants do for particular ailments. Is there enough of a drive for these communities, including, you know, the Khoi, the San, to protect the kind of knowledge that is passed down from generation to generation?
When I first started working on this research, I think my first approach was very naive, was to, you know, not speak about it per se, to protect means to keep it sacred, to never share. But once I got involved, I realized that's actually going to have the opposite effect. What we do need to do to protect our indigenous knowledge is to make it known. When it's known, then people will understand, that plant was derived from something that is indigenous to Africa and South Africa. That way we become proud of a product. To the traditional healers and the Sangomas that are currently using it, they also can say, listen, we have this product, we've been using it for decades. In fact, so much so that, a corporation came to us and enlisted it, and now it's one of the most popular pharmaceutical remedies in the world. So instead of actually hiding our knowledge, the best way to come around it is to actually share our knowledge, to say this is what Africa has, this is what we've been using, this is how we've become fit or stayed fit for generations. These are the herbs and remedies that our forefathers have used and now we are using today.
And you yourself, you know, we talked about the remedies that have been used at least to treat some of the symptoms around COVID-19 and around the pandemic. One of the issues that you've dealt with yourself as a botanist in your studies has been the development of a tonic?
Yes. So I took it upon myself, like, okay, I'm studying traditional medicine. I'm coming across all these amazing herbs, combinations to say. So I've taken it upon myself to start a new range. It's a homeopathic range. It uses all natural African traditional medicine. It's called Sweet Biotics. And in it, we started with a range called a Vitality Tonic. So because COVID has been such, it's been strenuous, both physically and mentally, we decided to start a range. It's a tonic just to boost you, your mental, physical fatigue, just to give you that vitality to keep going, because it has been a very, very, very challenging year and a half.
So how do you go from Sweet Biotics, that's the name that you just gave us, right, to being a botanist? I mean, is there another stream that you'd like to follow now in your career?
The career path is, so I've been studying traditional medicine, and as a niche creation type of a profile, I wanted to start this herbal range that encompasses African traditional medicine, just to show that, you know, you can make Umuthi very popular. It's not something to be ashamed of, and let's not be ashamed of it. And through that tonic, we go to the PhD work, which will involve even more further studies into African traditional medicine. And in that, I'm hoping to create a niche where, you know, you don't have to be Usangoma, you just have to be a child who understands and loves African traditional medicine, who encompasses it, who, you know, let it become mainstream to walk into any pharmacy and go and have options, you know, not just westernized medicine, but to go, listen, I'm going to pick an African alternative and it be okay. Let it be okay for you to open up your closet or cupboard or pantry and go, listen, today I'm using these herbs to heal myself, and it not be taboo. That's what we're trying to come across with Sweet Biotics.
Well, you've also received some recognition internationally. You know, what's the next, tell us more about that, and then what's the next step for you in terms of doing your part, and you've already done so, in steering academia towards at least considering traditional medicine as a real player?
So on the international platform, my work on traditional medicine has been recognized as revolutionary. I think most work currently has been done by China. Not much is known about Africa. Though if you look at the continental map, what you see is that Africa is very dense with biodiversity. We are rich in it. We live for it. I mean, if you go to Congo, all you see is plants. So it doesn't really make sense that we don't have a lot of data as to what's going on with African herbs or African plants. So when the study came about, everybody was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense, because as I said, there are very many tonics that are derived from African herbs. So we could connect those two and kind of go, oh, great. For one example, the cure to, or rather one of the medicines created for TB actually came from a Zulu sangoma many years ago, but that remedy made its way on a boat all the way up to the Western world, and it got popularized as a tincture that most people are using now whenever they have TB. So these stories are now coming about, and I think when studying this, it becomes very evidently clear that there is a richness of wealth in Africa. So that has been the international platform. And nationally, I think what I've tried to do is, because I'm getting such traction internationally, I never seem to get any nationally. So what we did was, because science is science and science gets a bit meticulous, I decided that it's great that I share the knowledge that I'm finding scientifically with everybody on a more social platform, which is why you'll find I'm doing a lot of interviews, just trying to share the knowledge that I'm finding, because it's of no use for me to make these great discoveries, but the people that it's actually meant to benefit are not getting access to the information.
Yeah. Incredibly important discussion. This Dorcas Lekganyane is a botanist. Thank you so much for your time this morning on this African Traditional Medicine Day. In fact, 80% of Africa's people relying on Umuthi. Incredibly important, specifically in the context of COVID-19.